Good afternoon. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining me. This is the podcast, The Endurance of Labor Laws. I am your lovely host, Lesley Sullivan, and today is episode 105, and we are going to take a look at the United States Department of Labor. This one is interesting. I learned quite a bit from this one. But first of all, let me give a big shout out to my listeners because you guys are awesome. I love to see you here. So a big shout out to British Columbia, Oregon, California, New York, Oklahoma, Texas, and Virginia. In terms of countries, the United States, Canada, the Russian Federation, and the United Kingdom. So let's go ahead and get started on this puppy here. Again, this is the United States Department of Labor. So just a few facts up front. It was formed March 4th, 1913. So it goes back a long ways, all the way to 1913. That's really interesting. As of 2014, they have 17,450 employees. As of 2012, their annual budget is $12.1 billion. So a lot of money, but not very many employees compared to their budget. So I think their budget is too big. I think they're overspending because that is a lot of money. I think that's way too much money to be spending in one department. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. It says United States Department of Labor, also known as DOL, is one of the executive departments of the U.S. federal government. It is responsible for the administration of federal laws governing occupational safety and health, wage and hour standards, unemployment benefits, reemployment services, and occasionally economic statistics. It is headed by the Secretary of Labor, who reports directly to the President of the United States and is a member of the President's Cabinet, so this is someone that he appoints. The purpose of the Department of Labor is to foster, promote, and develop the well-being of the wage earners, job seekers, and retirees of the United States, improve working conditions, advance opportunities for profitable employment, and assure work-related benefits and rights. Marty Walsh is the current secretary, having been confirmed by the United States Senate on March 22nd, 2021. A little bit of history here about this organization. It says in 1884, the United States Congress first established a Bureau of Labor Statistics, with the Bureau of Labor Act to collect information about labor and employment. This bureau was under the Department of the Interior. In February 1903, it became a bureau again when the Department of Commerce and Labor was established. United States President William Howard Taft signed the March 4th, 1913 bill establishing the Department of Labor as a cabinet-level department. In September 1916, the Federal Employees Compensation Act introduced benefits to workers who are injured or contract illnesses in the workplace. The Act established an agency responsible for federal workers' compensation, which was transferred to the Labor Department in the 1940s and has become known as the Office of Workers' Compensation Programs. So a lot has changed over the years from its beginning. Always in the right direction, I hope. So next I'm going to list off, let me get a drink of water. My mouth is dry. Okay, it's good to wet the whistle every now and then. Okay, so I'm going to list off some different agencies, boards, offices, programs, library, and people that function in this department or with this department. And it's kind of one of those things that, yes, this is the Department of Labor, but they have a lot of rules, laws, and regulations that they pass, mandate, or that they operate in within their functionality of their department. So these agencies, boards, offices, and programs, as well as libraries, function in conjunction with the Department of Labor. So interesting wording there, but I'm just going to list these off. So it is the Administrative Review Board, the Benefits Review Board, the Bureau of International Labor Affairs, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, Center for Faith and Opportunity Initiative. I'm surprised by that one because usually the federal government is not for faith. At least these days, it's kind of anti-Christianity. It's kind of interesting there. It says Employee Benefits Security Administration, Employees Compensation Appeals Board. I think it's ombudsman for the, whatever that word is, for the Energy Employees Occupational Illness Compensation Program. I think that word's made up, but it's for the Energy Employees Occupational Illness Compensation Program. Sometimes you have to take these articles with a grain of salt. So if something looks funky, doesn't seem like it's a real word, it's probably not. So just FYI. It says Employment and Training Administration, Mine Safety and Health Administration, Occupational Safety and Health Administration, Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs, Office of Inspector General. Almost all of these agencies have an Office of Inspector General. So just FYI, that's very common for a lot of these agencies and departments to have one of those people. Office of Labor Management Standards, Office of Workers' Compensation Programs, Veterans Employment and Training Services, Wage and Hour Division, Women's Bureau, Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation, Office of Administrative Law Judges, Office of Congressional and Intergovernmental Affairs, Office of the Assistant Secretary for Administration and Management, Office of the Chief Information Officer, so basically like IT or something, Office of the Assistant Secretary for Policy, Office of the Chief Financial Officer within this division. Then we have Office of Disability Employment Policy, Office of Public Affairs. A lot of these agencies and departments have their own Office of Public Affairs. So basically they decide what they want to be released to the public and what they want to keep confidential. Then it says Office of Public Liaison, Office of the Solicitor, Office of the Secretary, Office of the Deputy Secretary. It lists the Wirtz Labor Library and then Job Corps. Then we have a list of all the legislation. This is really interesting, these here. So, and it goes back quite a ways in terms of the years that this stuff was passed. So in 1926, there was a Railway Labor Act. And over time, we will go through all these because they are really fascinating because they really do help in regards to our jobs, whether it is in the public sector or private sector. It very much helps with our labor within the United States. So these are really important. So 1926 was the Railway Labor Act. 1949 was the Fair Labor Standards Amendment. 1953 was the Small Business Act. 1954 was the Internal Revenue Code. It says PL 83-591. So, needless to say, the IRS is way too large, way too big, and it's, oh man, they just overregulate things. So that's very unfortunate. I mean, I wish that they would deregulate things because, first of all, it wouldn't be so laborious for the citizens, which is you and me, but also it would make their jobs easier as well. So I would think it would benefit both parties. 1955, there is the Fair Labor Standards Amendment. 1958, Small Business Administration Extension. 1961, Fair Labor Standards Amendment. Also in 1961 was the Area Redevelopment Act. 1962, Manpower Development and Training Act. Also in 1962 was the Public Welfare Amendments. 1963 was the Amendments to National Defense Education Act. 1964 was the Economic Opportunity Act. 1965, they have the Vocational Rehabilitation Act. Also in 1965 was the Executive Order 11246. I don't know what that is, but we will dive into it later. Next, also in 1965 was the McNamara-O'Hara Service Contract Act. 1966 was the Fair Labor Standards Amendment. 1970 was the Occupational Safety and Health Act. 1973 was the Comprehensive Employment and Training Act. Also in 1973 was I guess they passed another section. It's Section 503 of the Rehabilitation Act. 1974, there was the Fair Labor Standards Amendment. Also in 1974 was the Vietnam-era Veterans Readjustment Assistance Act. Also in 1974 was the Employee Retirement Income Security Act of 1974. 1975, there was the Revenue Adjustment Act, which was in regards to the Earned Income Tax Credit. 1976, they had an overhaul of the vocational education programs. Also in 1976, they had the Social Security Act amendments, aid to daycare centers, which is kind of odd. 1977, they had the Fair Labor Standards Amendment. Also in 1977 was the Federal Mine Safety and Health Act. 1978 was the Full Employment and Balanced Growth Act. 1981 was the Budget Reconciliation Act. 1982, they had the Job Training Partnership Act. 1983, they had the Migrant and Seasonal Agricultural Workers Protection Act. 1988, they had the Family Support Act. 1988 as well, they had the Employee Polygraph Protection Act. In 1989, they had the Fair Labor Standards Amendment. 1990, they had the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation Act. 1993, they had the Family and Medical Leave Act. That's a really good one, by the way. 1993, they also had the Omnibus Budget Reconciliation and Bankruptcy Act. 1996, they had the Small Business Job Protection Act of 1996. Also in 1996, they had the Personal Responsibility and Work Opportunity Act. Also in 1996, they had the Veterans Employment Opportunities Act. 1998, they had the Workforce Investment Act of 1998. And in 2014, they had the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So, very interesting there. We covered a lot of material in a very short time frame. So for sure, I don't want to overload you. But this is very interesting what all the Department of Labor does. And just the fact that their budget is so huge, but yet they don't have a lot of employees. Because think about, how many companies do you know that have 17,450 employees, but their budget, meaning what they spend, not what they make or earn, but what they spend, is $12.1 billion. And that was as of 2012. So here's the thing. Government budgets tend to be really high and they tend to overspend. And one reason why they overspend, and I know this because a woman who used to work for the government told me this, and then she kind of hesitated and realized she should have said something. But she's obviously Democrat, and I guess could tell from my facial expression that what she was saying really disturbed me. But needless to say, she was complaining. We were at lunch one day with several friends that worked from different sectors and from different companies, and she happened to work for the government. And she said she was complaining and bragging about how much money she spends on their budget, and that she has to order all this stuff, and how am I just going to shop for all this stuff? I get to purchase all these things, but what do I purchase? Just like bragging about what all she gets to spend money on, but yet it's not her money, it's the taxpayers' money. So I was like, well, what is the issue? I was like, don't you know what you need and what you don't need? And she said, well, yes, but here's the thing. I guess her job was to help with the budget, but here's the thing. If she doesn't order the same amount as the present year or current or previous year, or request a little bit more, then they cut back their budget. So they never cut back their budget. They never admit that they need less money. They always want the same or more amount of funds to spend for their budget. And I was like, so even if you don't need like a brand new copier, or if you don't need a bunch of new computers, you're going to request that dollar amount because you're scared you're going to get less money? And she just looked at me. And it's like basically she got caught. She got caught revealing how the government spends our money. So basically the reason why this agency, and she doesn't work for the Department of Labor, she worked at a state level, but it was kind of the same thing. This budget of $12.1 billion for this federal department or agency, it's that high because they never want to admit that they don't need as much money. So they basically always overspend because they don't want to be held accountable for the budget that they have. So it's very unfortunate, but it's what they do, and it's very disappointing. Like, I didn't realize that our tax dollars were going towards things like this. I mean, I'm not against the department having access to the resources that they need, but when they purposely put things on their list that they say they need, when they don't, that's lying. That's technically a form of fraud. And these departments and these agencies do this, whether it's at a state or federal level, they do this. So that's why every single one of these departments should be audited every year. And they should be audited twice. they should have an internal audit and an external audit. Because otherwise, you're not going to catch stuff until it's too late. So that's always a problem there. But anyway, that is it for this lovely podcast. For the next one, we will either go over a labor union or another Superfund site, whatever the case may be. But I did want to go ahead and go over the Department of Labor because I found it to be very interesting because there's a lot that they do behind the scenes to help ensure that people can get jobs and that they have a safe working environment, regardless of what industry you work in. So I think that's a wonderful thing that they do. There are some things I don't like. I don't like that their budget is so high. That's ridiculous. Obviously, we have a overinflated federal government, and they need to cut back. I don't think their budget should be over, 100 million, maybe 50 million. I think doing 12.1 billion is insane. That tells me that they don't know what they're doing. They're just overspending. And it also makes me want to research and see how much these employees are making per year and what kind of benefits they have, because I bet they're getting the cream of the crop while the rest of us are not always living high off the hog, so to speak. But anyway, that is it for this podcast. As usual, I pray that you're happy, healthy, and whole, that you have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.